Call the meeting to the order. June 10th, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, good evening, everyone. Let's start with roll call.
Carey?
Here.
Walton?
Here.
Stephenson?
Here.
Schlapphauer?
Here.
Schreiber?
Here.
Wilhelm?
Here. Okay. Next item is ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and presentations.
Yeah, we got a couple here. The first one I'd like to announce is on June 17th, there's a joint workshop between the City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll be kicking off the comprehensive plan update. This will be here at City Hall on the second floor at 5 o'clock? And so it'll be open to the public, so it's a public meeting also. So just want to let that be known. The other item is we've had some staff turnover here at the City of Post Falls, and we have a couple of new planners that I would let them introduce themselves. But, you know, it was unfortunate, the individuals that we lost, but we equally got fortunate with some great talent, and so I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, Commissioners. Nice to meet you. My name is Andrew Millar. I'm a recent graduate of Marshall University with a bachelor's in geography, and I have an interest in planning and GIS. I've been with the city for about 2 months now, going really great. Really like it here, and I'm excited to be a part of the process.
Cool. Welcome.
Welcome.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Justin Souter. It is my second day on the job, and I've been in Idaho for less than 2 weeks. I'm coming from California. I went to a school out there called Cal Poly, got my bachelor's in city and regional planning, moved back to my hometown of Palmdale, California, which is in LA County. I was a planner there for 5 years before I moved to another city in LA County, Santa Clarita, and I was an associate planner there for 2 years. And I was up here in January with my family, looking for places to live, no job prospects. The job was posted, so I walked into City Hall, shook hands with John and introduced myself and told him I was going to apply when I got home. And now I'm here working in capacity as an associate planner. So awesome. I'm here with my wife and 2 kids. I got a 21-month-old and a 6-week-old. So we are very excited to be newest residents of North Idaho.
All right, so welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Is there an initiation period for them coming into?
We don't want to scare anybody off.
No, you can't quit. Once you're here, you're here.
John, if you haven't scared them off, we're not going to do anything to scare them.
Yeah. That might be why there's a turnover.
You are the initiation period.
High standards.
Yeah. Anything else?
That's it.
I'll just add for planning purposes, the workshop next week is only going to be maybe 45, 50 minutes because City Council does have a meeting at 6. Just so you guys know, it's not going to be one that's going to be 2 or 3 hours long or anything. So. Just like amendments to the agenda.
There's none.
All right. Any declarations of conflict, ex parte contacts, or site visits from commission members?
Nope.
No.
All right. Seeing none. All right. Let's go over the consent calendar.
Yeah, we just got one. It's action item A. It's the meeting minutes from May 13th, 2025.
Any questions on that? I think they were pretty short. Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay. Got a motion
Second.
and a second. Roll call, please.
Carey?
Yes.
Walton?
Yes.
Stephenson?
Yes.
Schlapphauer?
Yes.
Schreiber?
Yes.
Wilhelm?
Yes.
Our next item is citizen issues. Section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the commission. On an issue that is not on the agenda tonight, persons wishing to speak will have 5 minutes. If anybody wishing to speak? All right, seeing none. Next item is unfinished or old business.
And there's none.
All right, I have none. All right. Public hearings tonight. If you haven't already, if you want to testify, there's forms in the back. Please bring those up to the front here. There's 3 public hearings tonight. We're going to start with the first one of Harvest Meadows PUD and Subdivision. And we'll open the public hearing.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Manley, Planning Manager here, City of Post Falls, introducing the Harvest Meadows PUD and Subdivision, case file PUD 25-1 and SUBD 25-4. So the owner of this property is the Blackwell Home Development, and the applicant is Merle Van Houten, who is present to present for the owner and applicant today. There's going to be 2 sections of this tonight. We're going to be going over some PUD review criteria, and I'll be introducing those elements as well as the subdivision and the review criteria for that. But I will be kind of presenting them concurrent at the same time. So looking at the PUD here, you can see that they are looking at developing about 11.2 acres with a cap of 8 dwelling units per acre in the recently approved R2 zone for this area. Equally, for the subdivision aspect, they are going to, or they're going to be requesting about 92 single-family lots. Now, in the applicant package as part of the annexation, they did have some conceptual renderings at that time. It was perceived by you guys as a commission of being, it was coined, I think, the R2 Light. At that time, between those 2 areas, there was about 85 total lots. So there is, and I wanted to acknowledge a little increase from 85 to 92, and the applicant can go into those details, but I wanted to bring light to that aspect. In looking at that, you look at the PUDs and what they say in Post Falls Municipal Code. They do say that the density of a PUD is based on the overall gross land area, and going back, based off the 11.57 acres gross and the 92 lots, that comes out to about 7.56. So they are consistent with that 8 dwelling units per acre that was placed on this project as a condition of annexation at the time. The location, as you see, this proposed project here is highlighted in red. It's between Guy Road at this location and Spokane Street, and just west of the intersection of North Brookie Drive and Spokane Street. The current land use is transitional, and I say transitional, and I did put an asterisk because there was a little bit of a typo in your staff report, but I wanted to clarify that this is it's transitioning. There were some larger lots, single-family uses on that. If you drive out there now, you can see that there's been some scraping and scrubbing of the lands and some work that's been done on that, and it's obvious in transition to some future use. The site's over at the Rathrum Prairie Aquifer. The water provider would be the East Green Acres Irrigation District, with the City of Post Falls providing sanitary sewer services. Looking at the surrounding zoning in yellow, that's your typical R1 zone, single-family zone properties. And you can see that to the north, south, and east, that's what's on there with predominantly single-family uses. To the east, you do see those larger tracts. This is a golf course that's off to the east of Spokane Street with some smaller single-family homes that front Spokane Street on Brookie Drive. To the west, you have a larger remaining county pocket that's currently undeveloped and has an ag use in the county currently. Now going into the PUD review criteria, it's a little bit extensive, but we'll begin that. The proposed PUD provides, first criteria is to provide adequate utilities, services, and parking to service the proposed development. So as mentioned in the intro, it's going to be serviced by East Green Acres, and there was a will serve letter that was submitted within that submittal. Also provide wastewater collection system that is designed in accordance with the city's adopted wastewater plan and sufficient capacity to accommodate the proposed sewer flows. And you saw in the staff report that we would be able to service this. Looking at review the element C, provide adequate accommodations for other utilities necessary to support the proposed development. And within the staff report, you can see here that the corridor, that the proposal does identify the corridors for utilities and easements along the private and public roadways, including alleyways as seen in Exhibit A3. Exhibit A3 in your staff report, that's that preliminary plan that shows the layout and description of what they intend to develop. Element D provides sufficient parking throughout the development to adequately meet the parking needs of all the uses in the proposed PUD. So in Post Falls Municipal Code, we do require that there's 2 off-street parking stall for every residential lot. They do intend to meet that. And then on sheet C5 on Exhibit A3, they have like a colored map that shows that they do intend to, and it would be able to provide 122 on-street parking stalls for some parking overflow. Got a picture of that here. So on Holstein, running east-west, they proposed this private road on Ashier Lane. Now that one there, those units on the south side, those would be alley loaded, or more or less private, loaded from the rear from the private drive, with their fronts facing Holstein, which allows a continuous parking lane along the south side of Holstein. On the north side, those lots, those would be considered front-loaded homes with the front door and the garage facing Holstein. And they do have a 12-foot driveway they intend to construct on those lots that they're proposing 35 feet wide, which allows 23 feet for a vehicle parking for each one of those lots. So staff reviewed this and looked at it and compared it to our traditional R1 lots. Typically, we got about a 50 or 60-foot wide lot for our R1 with a 2-car garage. We may end up with a 24-foot wide driveway, leaving for about on-street parking for 1 additional on-street. So they're somewhat similar to how, in regards to on-street parking availability, as a typical R1 lot. Any questions for me at this point?
Would all the houses have at least 2, though?
Yeah, each one of those lots would have at least,
Alley?
would have at least 2 on-street parking stalls. Like these ones, I'm sorry I didn't go into that, but on this private lane, these ones here where you see in orange, these is where they would have some available parking from these. These would be front-loaded on it with the equivalent of 1 parking stall in each one of those lots with that orange stripe. To the east of this, you do see some continuous purple, and that's where some parking on both sides would be allowed, continuous. And that's how they come up with their math of this location.
And a quick density question.
Yep.
So the density for the PUD is based on the gross land area.
That's correct.
What is the difference on this property between the gross and the 11.2? So if the gross is 11.6,
I think I calculated out net was 8.2.
so what's the 11.2 then?
I mean, the 8.2 is the density. So if you take, I'll go back to
Oh.
so it's just a denominator. So with the 11.2 acres at 92 lots, it came out to 8.2 dwelling units per acre net.
Okay.
Versus if you go use the gross, then it came to 7.56. But
But even on that page,
uh-huh.
it says 12.16 acres with the right-of-way. So is the 12.16 the gross? Is the 11.57 the gross?
That's a good question. So it's the 11.7 is what I got off their submittal and their package.
Okay.
The 12.16 is what I calculated based off of, so the 11.57 is what is on Exhibit A.
Okay,
When you look at the legal descriptions of what was submitted for the annexations, they came up with the 12.16. I did not correct that when I put the 11.57, but there is a difference from the legals that came in as part of the annexation request and what is depicted on Exhibit A3 as part of the subdivision plans.
okay,
It's possibly the applicant can break apart those little nuances, but if we use the 12.16, that would drive down the density even more.
okay. And so if I'm trying to think of how to say that. But then the actual building area, when we take out common areas and open areas, is significantly less than that. So the portion that's actually developed with the houses is higher than the 8 dwelling units per acre, but that's allowable because this is a
Yes,
PUD.
that's-
Is that am I
That's why it
thinking
was
right?
worded the way it was in the PUD, because it entertained that you got to give up 10% open space.
Okay,
And a PUD may give up anywhere from 10% to sometimes as high as close to, I mean, I think I've seen 17% with a PUD. And so,
Oh, well, I mean, like the golf course across the street. They have much smaller residential lots, but the golf course itself is an open space. I'm assuming that was part of their PUD.
yeah, because otherwise you'd be penalizing
Right.
an applicant for giving more open space.
Right. Got it.
So that's why we went with the gross. And
Got it.
so it would encourage more open space with submittals.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, A, B, C, D. So here we are. So here's the second criteria. The proposed PUD provides for an integrated transportation network that adequately serves the proposed development by providing for the continuation of arterial and collector streets, meeting city standards for traffic volume in a manner consistent with the city's adopted transportation master plan. So identify here that Tennessee Avenue within Phase 1 would connect to Spokane Street. That provides an emergency access to the east, an additional one to Spokane Street, as well as when those properties get developed, they'll also be improving the west side of Spokane Street. So it also improves the north-south pedestrian ways as well. Phase 2, that would connect Guy Road to the subdivision as well, providing another access to the west. So in looking at what they're proposing, the roadways would have sufficient capacity to handle the development. Second, B, providing a local street network that allows adequate traffic circulation and snow storage throughout the entire development. So if you look at, you have Tennessee that can go out west, southwesterly, and then once the Guy Road gets connected, that would be another one westerly. And then you also have a connection to the east over to Spokane Street. So you have ultimately 3 separate ways out depending on where you resided within the subdivision. Within the development, and they would have with some of their open space opportunities to have areas for snow storage. Here's a description of the 3 ways. You have this way out to the southwest, directly west on Holstein, and then also up to the northeast, Spokane. C, providing a pedestrian and bicycle system designed to provide adequate circulation through the entire development and to all open spaces. So I provide a example here in green. That's their open space that they're proposing at those locations within the subdivision. And they do include some pedestrian access ways from Tennessee easterly to provide another connection to Spokane Street.
How big are those areas?
1 point, I have it in one of these others.
0.6 and 0.69?
1.32 acres is a combination between track C and D. And that came out to 11.7% open space. So when looking at this, it was determined that the development is proposed with an internal pedestrian network that connects the city to multi-use paths within the development, and that the sidewalks along the internal private roadways are proposed to have sidewalk on one side, and that would comply with city code. So the private drives would also have a pedestrian way connecting to those public ways out to the more of the arterial and collector roadways. Looking at review criteria 3, conserving and incorporating the site's significant natural, scenic, or historical features into development, if any. None was worth mentioning, but I did want to identify that because of the railroad corridor to the south and as conditioned with the annexation, there would be a 6-foot fence along the rail corridor. So you'd see a 6-foot fence creating, and that's as required by code to create some safety elements. Integrating a mix of compatible land uses in the development and adequately buffering or separating any incompatible uses in a development. As far as staff and looking at this, they're proposing, I believe, 2-story residential developments, single family, detached. The residents surrounding this, although the larger lots, also have single-family, two-story or less homes, and therefore they're considered more similar than dissimilar. Just there is a lot size difference. Here you see some of the lot sizes mentioned. What this one identifies locating the proposed uses on lot sizes in the proposed PUD in a manner that blends with the surrounding uses, neighborhoods, and public facilities that are located in the city. And I just identified what they're proposing and their lot sizes. Their average lot sizes, what it states here is 3107, the smallest lot. And I have an asterisk there because as part of the public process and public notice, it was identified that in the initial one, it was incorrectly stated at 2,800 square feet, and you may have read that in your staff report, but the smallest lot is 2,649, and the applicant is requesting this be the smallest lot, with the largest lot being 5,400 square feet. Providing at least 10% of the gross land area for open space that meets the recreational needs of the users of the development and provides a variety of recreational uses. And you can see here, and I've already discussed the amount and where those are located. There they are again. Criteria 4. The proposed PUD provides for timely development of the property and security and the future completion and maintenance by ensuring that each development block contains all the necessary elements to exist independently from future blocks. As a conditioned and as identified, this is planned to be in 3 phases per Exhibit A2. I've already brought up how the plan for connecting Tennessee to Spokane Street, and in Phase 2 connecting back to Guy Road. B, ensuring that each building in the development lot has sufficient access around the structure to allow for continual maintenance in the building and access for emergency services. So I've mentioned the layout. Both all of the private streets and public streets meet our city standards, which provides emergency access to those structures. Ensuring that funding mechanism exists for adequately maintained common space that are not publicly maintained. So these open spaces would be a private HOA maintained and be on the responsibility of the HOA to maintain those open space areas, as well as the public frontages. So here I kind of highlighted in red, that's the modification to what was proposed in the staff report, and that's that down to 2649. They do want to go less than 45 feet or less, maybe front-loaded. So going back to the plans, these lots here typically, and as our code requires, anything less than 45 feet, you would have to be rear-loaded, but they're looking for an exception so they can have a front-loaded option to those. They intend to accommodate that, as I mentioned, with the narrower driveway, so they can provide that parking. Reduction in right-of-way widths of the local residential road with parking on both sides from 65 feet to 60 feet. This isn't unusual with PDs. We see that quite a bit within PUDs is a request to reduce the right-of-way widths. You do see here on the 4th one, building setback to lots 53 and 69 at private road tracks boundary shall be reduced from 15 feet to 5 feet, where track B is wider than 30 feet. So that would be, if I can remember, let's see if I can, 53. Sorry. I'll let the applicant clarify that particular one. So that's it for the PUD. Do you have questions for me?
I have a quick question on the fencing that you were
Yep.
requiring. Is that, the piece you're talking about, would it just be that angled piece that's there by the railroad track? Or is
Yes,
that
it's
just
the
that
area that's
area?
contiguous to railroad tracks. Pretty much any subdivision that occurs in Post Falls that goes along the railroad corridor, we require a 6-foot fence.
Yeah, okay.
The lots that are fronting to Spokane Street, are they going to have driveways on Spokane?
No, they would use this alley that's right along here. That would be rear-loaded, and they would be fronting Spokane Street.
Okay. And 20 feet is acceptable for an alleyway for fire access?
Fire would actually use Spokane Street. They're gonna have a front door facing Spokane Street. So fire and emergency would actually go through their front door that's facing Spokane and go that way. Similarly, emergency services on Tennessee would go off the front doors facing Tennessee.
Okay.
Okay. We'll move on to the subdivision criteria. There's a proposed layout. I've already identified the East Green Acres as providing water in their will serve letter. I've also already identified the sewer provision that the city is going to be providing this for this proposal. Third one, that the proposed streets are consistent with the transportation element in the comprehensive plan. I've already kind of gone over the street layout and conformance of such. All areas of the proposed subdivision, which may involve soil or topographical conditions presenting hazards, have been identified, and proposed uses are compatible with such conditions. And I've already stated it's over the Raspberry Aquifer, but also there has been no identified hazards. The area of proposed subdivision is zoned for the proposed uses, and the uses conform to the other requirements found in the code. So single-family detached homes, they're allowed in the R2 zone. And subject to the PUD approval, then the requested deviations would be in conformance. Typically, they wouldn't be in conformance of R2 outright. That's why they're here with the PUD. The last one, the developer has made adequate plans to ensure that the community bear no more than its fair share of costs, provide services and paying fees, furnishing land, and providing other mitigating measures for off-site impact fees, streets, and whatnot. These are generally provided at the time of building permit in a form of impact fees. And they go on to mitigate impacts to parks, fire, EMS, public safety, multimodal pathways, and streets. There also is sewer cap fees that are paid for our collection system. Here's the agencies that were notified. Here's the comments. You had Post Falls School District, they were neutral. CUNY County Fire, they generally coordinate their issues at the time of the review process for the construction plans. Department of Environmental Quality, they said that there was no environmental impact comments that they could make. ITD, they were neutral. The pipeline said that there was no conflict. And the Highway District said that they had no comment. Any questions for me at this point?
Any questions?
Why are we back here on this? I mean, this was a couple months ago, and through here, we approved, I called it R2 Light. It's surrounded by R1, but it was just a little bit more. And now we're back asking for more houses, smaller lots. What was the purpose of the other meeting? I mean, shouldn't that have been done at that time?
I can let the applicant go into more detail on that question, but from what I hear and what generally goes on is the development community puts together a conceptual plan with as little cost as possible to come up with a concept plan. What they're looking for is entitlements, and so when they look for annexation and zoning, they're looking for the entitlements and the assurances to absorb those additional costs to put in a more refined plan. And so, you know, in this, I think the question would be, you know, they proposed 85 and now they're at 92. I think their road layout is very similar to what was there before. It's just there is a little bit nuanced. You know, I think the applicant can go into why it increased from 85 to 92, but that's not an unusual circumstance that you get your annexation and zoning, and then afterwards they come back here and they go into the subdivision afterwards. You know, sometimes we do get applicants that go for the subdivision and annexations concurrently. I think going forward, as our annexations are getting denied at an increasing rate, you're going to see people separating their subdivisions from that because they're not going to pay those costs, those development costs, before they get their entitlements. And so I think it's the applicants generally weigh out where they want to spend their money. But once again, I think Merle can shed more light into those kind of nuances for their particular owner and how that was implemented.
And we made a recommendation to the city council to approve the R2. But city council made that reasoned decision to accept the R2. as
Yeah,
part
we
of the
also
annexation.
conditioned, you also recommended having 8 dwelling units per acre, the cap.
Okay.
And so I do know them as the applicant was trying to stick to that 8 dwelling units per, per
Did
acre.
council put that in their reasoned decision?
That was actually in the annexation agreement.
Oh, it
So
was, okay.
actually what happened is you guys had your recommendation. I drafted the annexation agreement presuming that your guys' conditions would be upheld. And so that is what went before city council, and then city council approved it with such conditions, and so that's what got incorporated into the annexation agreement.
Okay.
They didn't add anything else?
Nope.
Hey, John, a general question here. I know the PUD frees them up to not meet some of our city standards that would exist if it was just a subdivision here. Is there some give and take on that? I mean, is there some benefit you see as a planner that, that gives them the freedom to not meet some setbacks and a few things, but are there some advantages for us?
So, from looking at our most recent housing needs analysis, the smaller lots and potentially could lead to a price point that makes it more attainable than a $600,000 square dollar typical R1 home. So that's one element. But they ask for them for the PUD. The general trade-off is they provide that open space for a density increase. That's almost always the trade-off with development. It's been going on, for some time. I think Montrose, when they did it, they went down to 50-foot wide lots in Montrose with providing some sort of open space. You take Fieldstone, I think they had some open space requirements with it. You have Tullamore and how we got some of the parks of Tullamore and some of the regional park up at Tullamore, and they had some smaller lots, rear loaded, some pocket home type product, and some housing diversity, and that's how we got the open space there. Now, those are more city-owned parks rather than a privately owned park, but if you don't have 300 acres, it's tough to ferret out and parse out enough land to transition to a minimum 5-acre requirement for a city park for Post Falls. And so I think that's some of the nuances on why. And they got to weigh out what they're looking at for their development.
So they're given 1.36 acres and then asking for a PUD, smaller lots, is that how that's what they're given?
Yeah, so that's why they're going down to, I think, 35 lots, if I remember correct, 35-foot wide lots. So instead of going larger, more width lots, they're getting some design deviations, but providing an additional 1.32 acres of open space.
And staying under that maximum density.
Yes.
Thanks, John.
All right, invite the applicant up.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Merle Van Houten. I am the representative of the applicant tonight, presenting Harvest Meadows Subdivision and PUD, an R2 single-family development in the city of Post Falls. I'd like to thank John for his excellent presentation and the collaboration he's given throughout this process. As always, all of the city staff has been very helpful. So I'm the owner of Van Houten Consulting and Design. We are a civil engineering firm in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and this request is made on behalf of Blackwell Homes, which is a local development company with multiple projects in the city of Post Falls. So this is 11.57 acres of R2 single-family subdivision PUD. You're well aware of the surroundings, and I'm going to kind of gloss over some of these things that John covered really well so that we can focus on the details. There's the existing conditions of Guy and Spokane that will be improved during corresponding phases of development. What I really wanted to start with is just how we got here tonight. Like you said, we were here a few months ago requesting annexation, and at that time, and still currently, what we have is a vision to bring affordable housing to this neighborhood and address a lot of the concerns that we see through the studies that the not only the city, but KMPO has authorized. And even during our city council hearing, the mayor signed a petition for, a fair housing petition. So the need is real. It's just a matter of people wanting to step up and address it. And that's where this project comes in, where we're bringing homes, below median values. We're allowing people who grew up here to stay here. Our sons and daughters who are looking for a place to live can and are having trouble finding things at the median value can find solutions like this. And the owner has no intent to hold on to these, and as rentals, these will be on the available open market. But we also want to do it with neighborhood compatibility in mind. That second column goes on to discuss how we formed this in a way that was going to be in concert with the city's comprehensive plan. We wanted to hit that 8 units per acre, which is what it outlines. We don't want to propose townhomes or duplexes. This is detached single-family housing, and it's scaled housing, which I'm going to focus on that bullet point a little bit. We could have gone a different route and come in with an R1 annexation and then requested a cottage home neighborhood before you here tonight. But in that, we would have been limiting ourselves to homes of a maximum of 1,400 square feet. We feel like we can do a very cottage home style R1 development, but with a little bit bigger of a housing style. So that's what this is. This R2 Light allowed us to come in and propose something that we feel is a little bit better, but still meets that affordable housing market. So when we were here with annexation, we had looked at the land use, which is low density residential, which is all types of single family uses, up to 8 dwelling units per acre. That's straight out of the comprehensive plan, what it envisions for this area. The focus area is Central Prairie. With land values increasing, new projects are more likely to integrate higher density housing with community amenities to broaden their appeal to buyers. And future growth should embrace a variety of housing types and land uses, maintain quality standards, and provide even greater emphasis on connecting neighborhoods to community trails and nearby amenities. That was the basis of our request then, and that's still the basis of our vision now. We're using these documents as the guardrails for what we're bringing before you tonight. The conditions that were placed upon us at that time and were ultimately accepted by City Council were density areas will not exceed 8 units per acre. Only detached single-family units are to be constructed. Garages shall not exceed 65% of the front facade of the residence. A 6-foot fence shall be constructed along the boundary line of the rail line. And no certificate of occupancy shall be obtained for lots within, let's just say, the western half until the road connection to Spokane Street is established. So that is where we left it with City Council. And so before you tonight, we're back with our subdivision and PUD applications. John did a great job of outlining this layout. We have 92 lots that are, 35 feet wide at least. And the depths have been set in a way that when we prescribe the standard R2 setbacks of 10 feet in the rear, 15 front, and 5 on the side, we have a buildable area of at least 25 feet by 50 feet for each of these lots. So again, we could have come in here with something that looks very similar to this and called it an R1 cottage, but we decided R2 PUD would allow us to go beyond that 1,400 square foot maximum house and get maybe closer into the range of 18,000 or 1,800 square feet, sorry. Anyway, but road networks, Holstein and Tennessee are public roads with parking on both sides, and then Ayrshire is a private road with parking on one side. We have open space tracks that I will get into more detail with here. And we'll discuss utilities and amenities a little bit too. So taking that same slide and blowing up the text a little bit so it's a little bit more readable for everyone. We've already kind of talked about a lot of the project overview. 92 lots, single-family residences with attached garages, extending the multi-use trail along Spokane Street that there's currently a gap, and then bringing it in to connect to Tennessee. We'll be dedicating right-of-way, constructing improvements, and we'll be doing this in 3 phases, which I'll show you maps of in a second. And in return, we're asking for these deviations as part of our PUD while we dedicate open space. So as John said, the minimum lot size will be reduced from 4,000 square feet to 2,649, but still not exceeding that 8 units per acre. Vehicular access is of lots 45 feet or less may be front-loaded. We're reducing the right-of-way from 65 feet to 60 feet. And those two that John were having trouble identifying, I can show you those. Let's go back where it's a little bit bigger. So along this private road tract, we have a pocket here for stormwater and snow storage, and we have a pocket here for stormwater and snow storage. So lots 53 and 69 are already pushed back from the road a ways, but because they still technically flank a street, we don't want to hold them to that 15-foot setback. They're already more than 15 feet away from the pavement itself. So we're requesting the standard 5-foot setback on those two. That's the only building setback deviations we're requesting in this project. Everything else meets the R2 standard for building setbacks. Existing conditions, as John said, that's begun to transition. And we have our preliminary plat document, which we can dissect further if you want to. But here's our first look at the phasing plan. Phase 1 starts off adjacent to Spokane Street in the east. It connects Tennessee up and over to Spokane Street and constructs lots 1 through 25. Most of them will front Tennessee, but we do have this alley here that John was describing. It brings access to these lots in this pocket here, and then we have a small private tract that kind of provides a turnaround T in the north. Phase 2 connects Holstein, or creates Holstein, which connects Tennessee to Guy, and would bring these lots online. Oh, back to Phase 1. Phase 1 is that open space right there. Phase 2 is this open space right here, and those lots along the north boundary, as well as the improvements to Guy. Finally, Phase 3, we finish out with Ayrshire, connecting Holstein to Tennessee and all of the adjacent properties to that. So here in a color-coded concept, you see the same thing. The light blue is the public road, Spokane Street's improvements, the green is the open space, and the red is either the alley or the private road tract. Similarly, Phase 2, Guy improvements, another open space, public road, and residential lots to the north. And finally, Phase 3, a private road tract and the remainder of the lots. So this slide dissects the lot layouts themselves a little bit so you can get a better visual on what we're proposing. So as I said, we're adhering to those R2 standard setbacks. So 5 feet on the sides, 15 feet in the front, 10 in the rear. But we've created each lot in a way that leaves us with at least a 25 by 50 foot building envelope. So this one here on the left is a blow up of Ayrshire. So these lots on the upper side of the page are those ones that actually front Holstein. You can see, loading is in the rear, and you wind up with, a little paved front porch and walkway out to the Holstein. Whereas the ones that abut the southern subdivision boundary are front loaded and come in off of the private tract. We also took a moment to blow up the ones that are adjacent to Spokane Street. Those ones there were given a little bit extra lot depth because what you have is, as you come off the alley, you still want that 20 feet of driveway parking plus your garage. So these start off with a buildable depth of 69 feet, but when we account for that, we take away another 10 feet, we wind up with 59 of buildable area, which allows us to build that same 50-foot deep product and still just pull the front of the house back a little bit farther from Spokane Street to create just a little bit more separation there. What am I doing? Open space. The first phase will feature the connection trail from the Spokane all the way into Tennessee. This will provide that fence that John spoke about as well. So what you have is you come in away from the rail and away from Peregrine Place is a fenced barrier, a vegetated buffer against the rail, and then a trail and a green space, all before you get to the residential lots. This provides a great buffer from the rail line, as well as a nice transition from Peregrine Place. So similarly, on the other side, you have a level grassed field that is, it was purposely left as just low-level grassed open space because, we understand that these lots, while they're affordable, they don't allow a lot of yard space, particularly for kids who have a lot of energy. So this is, their opportunity to run around and get that energy out. So we have a few shade trees and a couple of benches in support of that area, while the area back across the street in Phase 1 is more of like a rolling hill aesthetic that'll give a nice entry into the subdivision. So I'm going to come back to that here in a second, but this is that exhibit that John had up talking about on-street parking. So as he said, there's two colors, orange and purple. Where you see orange, you have on-street parking, but it's interrupted by driveways. So with a 35-foot lot, you have just enough room for a single-car driveway and an on-street parking spot. So orange means, you've got one on-street parking spot per lot. Where there's purple, you have on-street parking that is unencumbered by driveways. So there's everything is either rear-loaded or, fronting an open space, and on-street parking can go on continuously. And as we divide that up, we came up to 122 on-street parking spaces for 92 lots. That's in addition to the one that they're going to park in their garage and the one that they're going to park in their driveway. So going back to a point I was making a second ago, as you come in from Peregrine Place on Tennessee, instead of an abrupt change from R1 to this R2 cottage style product, we have a transition area. You're going to come in from Peregrine Place on Tennessee, and you're going to have open space on both sides. And then as you continue on, you're not going to have a field of driveways. You're going to see a nice continuous green space where there are no driveways, rather street trees. And that continues on as you come onto Spokane Street. Similarly, Holstein, all the driveways on the south side are rear-loaded, so you'll have a similar condition where instead of just driveways on both sides, you get a nicer aesthetic of a continuous green space with more street trees. So I feel we achieved there by doing this is just a better, more of that neighborhood compatibility. These are single-family detached homes, but there's a nice aesthetic that's been well thought out as well. How much time do I have left? I have less than a minute. I'm just going to skip to a couple of these subdivision and decision criteria, just for everybody's time interest. Number 5, the area proposed for subdivision is zoned for the proposed use, and the use conforms to the requirements found in this code. This subdivision design is consistent with the zoning, density, land use, and conditions of approval placed during annexation. So this is the implementation of the conditions that were put before us. PUD approval will put the subdivision into full conformance. PUD decision criteria, let's focus on number 3. The proposed PUD provides enhanced community design. City Council conditioned single-family housing only and maximum density 8 units per acre to create a compatible R2 light. So that was the culmination of this, what Mr. Wilhelm, coined as the R2 light. The proposed PUD is providing 11.7% open space and the equivalent on-street parking to that of an R1 zone subdivision. That's a quote taken from the staff report. We have pedestrian connectivity to the Spokane Street pathway and that nicely vegetated buffer to the railroad and to Peregrine Place that I just discussed. So I'm going to leave it there because I'm out of time and open it up to questions.
I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
The lower road, it's the
Yes.
single, that kind of doesn't have any parking.
It has parking
On
on
one side only?
Yes.
Did I hear you say that's a private road?
Yes.
So how does that work with like city, the other roads are they get like for snow plowing and stuff? How does that work when part of it is, or is all of those considered private roads? There'll be no city plowing in there or just,
The city would plow the public roads.
so they would just plow the top, that's considered
So, this little segment here, you mean? Is that what you mean?
So none of your interior roads are going to be plowed by the city? That's all private?
So this one here that's, we've called Holstein, that runs east to west.
Yeah.
That one is public, and then Tennessee
Okay, that's
is
what I understood. Yeah.
public.
Does that create a problem? I mean, because then the bottom one is just HOA paid for, right? Private
Yes.
plowing of some type.
Right. So yeah, there will be HOA documents will be formed, and it'll.
I mean, I just wondered about an issue with, city plows come through at one time and then the HOA doesn't plow till
We have a few
8 hours
streets.
later or something, or vice versa.
Yeah, we have a few streets in Post Falls that intermix private streets with public streets. And yeah, they do come at different times, and then the CCNRs within the adopted documents kind of clarify the obligation for maintenance within those CCNRs.
Okay. And so thus you have the 2 spaces for the snow. Is that for your private plowing then? Is that what
Yes.
you're?
Because, yes, so up at the top of the page here, we have on the left a typical section for a local city street public, where you have a stormwater swale on both sides. But our private street, we don't have that stormwater, running continuous.
Yeah.
So we've designated these 2 areas, at either end of the private street for that purpose, stormwater and snow storage.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
What's the kicker to go from phase 1 and now we're ready to start phase 2? What's that determining factor?
I mean, ideally, nothing. Ideally, we'd roll into from one to the next, but, economic conditions would be, the variable there, I would think. We can't know what's going to happen.
Like I was saying, are you going to get 95% done with phase 1 and then move to phase 2? Or are you like, well, we're halfway done, things are selling, we're going to move to phase 2 now, but we're still only halfway done with phase 1?
I
To be
think,
determined.
yeah, to be determined. I think, one of the things that we've looked at as we've developed this project is the Miracle on Britain subdivision. It's gotten a lot of interest, and it seems to be very successful, which is encouraging to us. So if that kind of momentum carries on to this project, I would see, these happening very quickly, one after another.
Okay. Are there any structures in the green spaces?
No. So and that's again something that was kind of a conscious decision. We have, paved trails, rolling kind of a hillside aesthetic here with more vegetation, and then an open play field kind of area here with benches and a few shade trees. And one of the considerations I was given, and we used the example of a pavilion in our internal discussions. Like, if we put a pavilion in here, it's a great amenity, but we have to be mindful that this is an affordable housing community, and the people who are paying HOA dues may not want to have the upkeep of a pavilion coming out of their pockets. So we try to find a balance, but things like splash pads and pavilions didn't seem right.
So what is that? What's the closest city park then? Is that could be Crown Point?
Chris is going to pull up a map on that. I do want to propose something and review this. It just dawned on me, and I wanted to bring it up. I'd like to actually add one more condition, and that would be that prior to moving on to the 3rd phase, that the second park would need to be completed. And I wanted you to comment on that. We kind of have a lessons learned.
Okay. And that's what we contemplated here, going back to our phasing. Phase 1, we have our open space, and then phase 2, that's our vision.
Yeah, it's just from historical elements. We don't know, like you said, the market, what may come in the future, but I wouldn't want someone to want to combine like phase 2 and 3 prior to the completion of that park. And so adding language that would secure the completion of that park prior to phase 3.
The green space.
The green space.
Okay, I mean, so you're saying that, and I'm sure I'm not gonna be agreeable to this, but you kind of lost me. Somebody might try to combine phases 2 and 3 and build that before they build the green space?
They might finish out the houses on phase 3 before that
Oh.
park's done.
So
I see.
as a lessons learned, it did occur here in the past. They posted, there was some semblance, they received their plat, and then the community was left holding and figuring out how we can get that park completed. And so a light bulb went off while I was sitting here, and I apologize it not going off sooner while I was in my office creating a staff report. But it did go off today, and I talked with legal to find out if I could bring that up. And I wanted to bring it up while you're here before public comment started going, to give you a chance to either to comment on it now, or maybe you could, I don't know, can you bring it up in rebuttal later if you wanted to?
Okay, yeah, let's bring it up in rebuttal later, that's fine. But I think there's a solution there, yeah.
Okay.
And a question about parking. So my understanding is you're required to provide 2 parking
Or Crown Point.
spaces per residence.
Mhm.
And so that's accomplished by a 12 by 20 driveway plus a garage space?
Correct.
So those are all one-car garages?
Correct.
Okay.
The closest park, from looking at it, is either the Crown Point Park, or it could be to the south, the White Pines Park to the south. You are somewhat in close proximity through the private golf course to the east, and then you also have off to the west, Prairie Meadows. There's also the open spaces out in the meadows that are,
Grange.
yeah, off to the west. Oh, thanks, he's bringing that up.
Cool, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Public testimony? All right. Not wishing to speak in opposition, Molly Lorenzo. Oh, ma'am, if you have a question, you can come up to the podium. We need to get it on record. Yes. You just go, name for the record, and then you can ask the question, and then he'll have a chance to rebuttal, and he can probably answer your question at that time. Okay?
Molly Lorenzo. So how come they say it's no environmental impact when that used to be farmland and now it's just a bunch of houses? That's an environmental impact. So that's misspoken in that paperwork.
Yeah, I can't contemplate why DEQ responded the way they did, but
Sure.
they didn't say impact. They said no environmental concerns. You could deduce one way or the other whether it's an impact or not, but their wording was no environmental concerns. So,
But it is a concern to us.
right. It was when you do notice jurisdictions, they write a response based off of from their perspective as DEQ rather than a nearby resident. So their response in that notice was based off of DEQ's response to that notice. Oh, sorry. DEQ is Department of Environmental Quality.
But it doesn't mean that we still want that done. We still want our farmland.
And then I'll go ahead and read the rest of this, because it does have some different stuff on here. How's this going to affect the city of Post Falls? I've lived in my house for 10 years. My bill has gone up $30. Are those houses going to be on city water or Green Acres? What time of day will construction start? I don't want it to affect any sleeping hours. I'm sure the applicant can address some of those questions. Wishing to speak yes. In opposition, William Guy.
I'm William Guy. I live on Guy Road, and this whole thing is kind of new to me. I don't know what we're doing here because we've been through this once before. They designed it the way they wanted it. They brought it in here, and you guys okayed it. This council okayed it. Now they're back here wanting to change it. And when they seen that property for sale, they decided they wanted to buy it and put houses on it. Well, the people to the south and to the north, when they bought their homes, they checked the zoning on that property because they knew it would be developed someday. And they seen it was R2, just like, or R1, just like theirs was. So they expected someday there would be houses all along, just like in their neighborhood, on both sides. And you keep saying this thing is compatible to everything around it. It's totally different than everything around it. These people all bought their homes thinking that someday there would be another house sitting right behind them, like theirs. Not a two-story outhouse that people are going to be 10 feet from the fence, looking down into their backyards, destroying all of their privacy. And these guys bought that property. They should have seen what the zoning was and sat down and say, can we make money by developing this with the zoning that's there? And if they can't, they should pack up and head down the road. They shouldn't come into a city thinking that I'm going to buy this piece of property, but then I'm going to go to the town and get it all changed to fit what I want. And that's basically what they've done. And we come in here to the meetings and we watched and we went home and licked our wounds because we got beat. But now they're back here wanting to make it worse. And my neighbor, Debbie, she has been complaining to the builders about it, and they have agreed to move one house a little farther north away from her fence because the houses along Guy Road will be facing east, and that gives them the right to put it 5 feet from the fence. Well, the builder has agreed to move the house over 5 feet, so she'll have the same space that everybody else down the road will. But it's just not right, and everybody says, oh, we got to have all this low-income housing. Well, low-income housing, that horse left the barn a long time ago, and he ain't coming back. Right in yesterday's paper, there's some of these little houses like they're planning on building, and they're real proud of the fact that they start out at $400,000. Go down to the bank and try and borrow $400,000 to see what your payment's going to be. It ain't going to be low income. And because I say there ain't no such thing as a low-income house in Kootenai County anymore, unless it's 100 years old. But I think it's bad enough the way it is now, and it should be left the way it is, and not make the lots smaller. And they want to make the streets narrower. And I don't know if any of you folks have drove through those developments out there, but the streets in the developments there now aren't wide enough. You go out there, and if you're coming between two parked cars, you'll wait until the guy coming the other way goes past, because it's awful damn tight between two parked cars, especially if they're big pickups. And they want to make the streets narrower yet. And then go out there in the wintertime after the snow plow's been through and had to plow snow around all those parked cars. That makes that street maybe 6 feet narrower. And it's, you know, you guys all got to stop and think, what are you building here anyway? You know, it's, you know, would you want to live in it, you know? And nobody else is going to want to. People might have to, but they're not going to want to, that's for sure. And you say, okay, they're all houses are going to have 3 parking spaces. Drive out there now and look at those houses out there. The garages are all full of their belongings. They can't put cars in them. And another thing, put your car in the garage. Your wife comes home, puts hers behind hers. You want to go downtown, wife's got to run out and move her car so you can get yours out and then put hers back, and then it's going to be shuffling cars all the time. And everybody said, well, put parking on only one side of the street. That's impossible. There's not enough parking on one side of the street to accommodate both sides of the street. So you can't put one side parking on one side. But I don't know, just, because I'm in a bad spot myself. I'm selling my property to the same guys, but, but it's just not a good thing, and it's gonna be permanent. It's gonna be that way forever. And it ain't gonna get any better as time goes by. And if people don't keep those houses up, it's just gonna turn into a damn ghetto. And if every kid don't put his bicycle away and the wagons away, every yard's gonna look like a trash heap before long, because they got no place to put their stuff. They either gotta stuff it in the garage or it just lays in the yard. And I've seen these places before, and it's not pretty after they get older. But I guess it's in your guys' hands, but you do whatever you feel right, but I say turn it down. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Wishing to speak in opposition, Deborah Thomas.
Hi, I'm Deborah Thomas. I'm the Debbie Bill just referred to. I'm at 384 West Blanton Avenue in Post Falls. Even though I and surrounding homeowners raised many objections, we lost the rezoning issue for Elfer's annexation, the 5 acres on the west side of the proposed subdivision. The city approved going from R1 low density with a minimum lot size of 6,500 square feet to R2 light, as they called it, allowing medium density with a minimum 4,000 square foot lot size, and in so doing manipulated the compatibility requirement. There are no adjacent subdivisions to this proposed PUD that are compatible to such small lots. A condition was also approved allowing a maximum 8 detached single-family homes per acre. This would create a maximum of 40 homes on Elfer's 5 acres. This 5 acres was approved separately from the Steckman annexation to the east. We are now being presented with a PUD where the developer wants to combine both annexed properties and get a variance in order to have lots as small as 2,649 square feet. This is a 34% reduction from the 4,000 square feet minimum just approved. Not to mention is less than half the original 6,500 square feet minimum requirement we were trying to preserve. In addition, it appears the developer wants to now have about 50 or more homes on the Elfer's 5 acres instead of a maximum of 40. These changes should not be approved. There should be conditions in place for lots to still be 4,000 square feet minimum, only a maximum of 40 detached single-family homes on Elfer's portion, and a condition that the homes be a maximum of 2-story homes, not 2.5 or more. Also, there should be tight conditions, restrictions, and enforcement put in place for the development, limiting the number of homes to very few or none that can end up being rental properties. We have always been told these are intended to be owner-occupied homes. The verbiage on the PUD plat map we received was incorrect concerning lot sizes. Out of 92 lots, 81 are under 4,000 square feet. 63 of those are under 3,000 square feet. As proposed, Lot 88 is adjacent to my property with the side of the house running parallel to my fence. The setback is stated as only 5 feet from my fence. A condition should be this side be changed to a 10-foot setback to match all other homes to the east of this lot. This morning I spoke with Merrill, the city engineer for the development, and he stated the owner has agreed to this change. Again, this should be a condition. Merrill also stated this morning that the owners agreed to remove a very large cottonwood tree that is partially on my property. This should be a condition of the development. Merrill indicated this would be done when the improvements are made to Guy Road, probably in phase 2. This was the only tree left after clear-cutting the Elfer section of the proposed PUD. It is a massive tree, over 100 feet tall, that is basically 2 trees going from a single very large trunk. With widening the streets, adding sidewalks and swales with new trees, underground utilities, and covering most of the land with homes, streets, etc. in the new development, this tree will be greatly impacted negatively. My tree expert, who is a certified arborist, Devin at Grace Tree Service, highly recommends this tree be removed before any development occurs. If the developer removes this tree, I will buy and donate a new tree the developer can then plant in the new swale near the location of this cottonwood. The new tree can then grow and adapt to the new environment. My preference would be an evergreen tree, but definitely not a tree that drops anything but maybe leaves. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Wishing to speak in opposition, Kristen Nelson.
Hello, my name is Kristen Nelson. Thank you for having me. I am in opposition of this. I was in opposition of the medium density. I live on Tennessee. This is absolutely 100% going to impact me. I bought this house and have spent thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars knowing that this was going to be developed in houses that were going to be like mine. I understand. I appreciate development. I just do not want low-income housing at the end of my street. It will absolutely impact me. These houses are going to be 1,800 square foot homes on 2,600 square foot lots. They're gonna have absolutely no yards. Those kids are gonna be playing in the street, in streets that have cars lined by them. It's gonna be a safety hazard because the kids are always going after their balls in the street. The houses on Spokane Street, there's no parking on Spokane Street, correct? It's all gonna be alley parking. I don't know if you know the subdivision, is it Syringa? Off of Syringa Street, where all those, the alley parking and all those houses are, come off the alley, and there's cars in every single one of those driveways. And it absolutely looks horrendous. There's gonna be no places for these cars to park. And all the overflow parking, is it gonna end up on Tennessee in front of my house? I'm gonna be very disappointed because I did not buy in Post Falls to deal with low income at the end of my street. So I hope you take this into consideration, and I challenge you to make this low density housing like it was. This is actually upsetting me so much that I might consider moving out of the city of Post Falls. So I just wanted to let you know how I feel, and I absolutely do oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Applicant, wanna come back up for rebuttal?
All right. Well, no, I appreciate people coming out and speaking their minds. Some valid concerns that I can address, but it does leave with a tough balancing act. We're here to provide a affordable housing neighborhood, a cottage-style neighborhood that'll bring homes to people who are otherwise priced out of the market. But we want to be mindful of our neighbors and respectful of their thoughts. So I'm just going to kind of go down the list and try and touch on a few of them. Construction hours, yeah, construction timing can be limited from like 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Those are things that can happen in the construction improvement agreement. Water is provided by East Green Acres and sewer by Post Falls, which have all been vetted and are adequate. So kind of in regards to changing the layout and changing the zoning, I think that's a matter of just not, from being familiar with the procedure. Last time we were here, we requested annexation. There was no city zoning. It was never an R1 zone. It was I think ag suburban or some county zoning designation because it was in the county. It was not in the city, and it never received a city zoning designation until it was approved for R2. So that is the way it came in is R2. It was never, ever, ever in the city as R1. So, and as far as the layout goes, you know, it kind of touches on what Mr. Guy was saying and what Ms. Thomas was saying, you know, and John during his presentation as well. What we came to you with, you know, the night of that hearing was a concept. And at that time, that concept was an Elfers piece that was driven by one applicant, and then a Steckman piece that was, you know, envisioned by another. And they were similar, but in the time that we went from, you know, this hearing in front of you to the city council, it went to a single applicant. And so the vision, you know, instead, at that point, you know, these two projects that were running side by side and happened to be next to each other kind of became one. So yes, there was two annexation applications because there was two applicants. Now there's one applicant. You know, we have actually 3 parcels that are zoned for R2, but it's being brought to you tonight by one applicant, and that's how we can comply with the PUD, how our layout and our PUD proposal complies with city code tonight is because it's all one application. And I had good conversation with Ms. Thomas earlier today. As she said, we agreed. Let me kind of get to this. What's a good one? So this is that lot 88 that she's talking about. You know, we had a good conversation, very friendly, about can we accommodate an extra 5 feet, you know, and create a 10-foot setback on this lot. Yes, that lot happens to have extra width, and yes, we can. In fact, I told Ms. Thomas that I would actually edit my presentation so that it actually shows that you can see the 10-foot rear setbacks, and it is right in line with that, just to show her that we are sincere in that. That is okay. And then that tree that she was talking about, it's too hard to see here, but I told her we'd just go ahead and add that label, existing tree to be removed. That is okay with us, and we can be conditioned with that. We didn't talk about, you know, those other things about being approved separately in an Elfers piece and a Steckman piece, but had we, I would have explained to her what I just explained to you, that tonight we are bringing, you know, 3 parcels to you under one application. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to go into more detail about that. And so, you know, what we've done is, you know, what we feel is our best to create an affordable housing cottage-style community that is compatible, because we aren't proposing duplexes, we aren't proposing townhomes. You know, these are single-family residences. We've provided a nice transition area, you know, from Peregrine Place, from the railroad. As you enter here, you know, you're going to come through not just an abrupt change from an R1 product to a cottage home product. You know, it's going to be inviting. It's, you know, we've purposely put our open space there with that in mind. And like I was saying earlier, where's that? You know, this will not be, you know, just chopped up with driveways. Or, you know, the south side of the street's going to have a nice aesthetic to it, where, you know, it'll be free of driveways. It'll be continuous green space, continuous trees, which is, you know, an aesthetic that a typical subdivision couldn't provide. Let's see. To address Ms. Nelson's really quickly, you know, we've kind of dissected this slide, and we can go through it again if you like. But, you know, we have more on-street parking than a typical subdivision. There won't be any parking allowed on the alley, which is partly why we created this little spur of a trail right here, is to anticipate people who utilize the alley who may want to, you know, have guests who park on the street. The condition that John mentioned, we are willing to accept that condition, that this green space will be constructed as a part of phase 2, and you know, we can refine that wording maybe through some more conversation. Okay, John nods. So I'm going to open it back up to questions and conclude my rebuttal.
Questions? No. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Close out the hearing. I'll go into review the criteria.
All right, commissioners, thank you. So we're going to go through the Harvest Meadows PUD criteria first. You've already had quite a bit of testimony about that, and then we'll work into the subdivision deliberations. So, PUD review criteria under Post Falls Code 1820.080E. And I'll just start listing them, and these will be a little bit repetitive to the subdivision if we get to that point. So the first is whether the proposed PUD provides for adequate utilities, services, and parking to service the proposed development. And I'll take these sections separately. A, providing a public water supply system. And I think this one is fairly self-explanatory with the East Green Acres, providing the water service, unless there's disagreement on that.
No question on that one.
Secondly, providing the public wastewater collection system, and similarly, the city of Post Falls has a will serve letter and is able to serve them on that issue. C, providing adequate accommodation for other utilities necessary to support the proposed development.
I didn't see any questions raised on providing easements for electricity or gas or any of that.
Yeah, and I think there was some testimony that Exhibit A3 showed utility easements along both the public and the private roadways, so not much opposition on that issue. D, providing sufficient parking throughout the development to adequately meet the parking needs of all uses proposed in the PUD.
I think this is where I have an issue. I don't know if it actually does, honestly. 'Cause, some of the testimony we've heard, and it was the same thing I was thinking, if you got a one-car garage and a one-car driveway, how are you getting the other car out? And I've been through, even in my own neighborhood and other neighborhoods and where friends live, the narrower those streets get, it's hard to get by. So,
I don't think there's enough parking. I think it's just gonna be so tight in there for people to get around, and then snow plows. I mean, I've been in some of these other subdivisions where it's just cars everywhere. And then if you're parking behind your one-car garage there, I parked at my sister's the other day, and my truck was just too long. I'm parked into the walkway. So that's kind of
My truck is 23 feet. So if I try to park and I'm just driving a standard Dodge, if I park in a 20-foot driveway, I'm going to be backed out into the road.
Yeah, you're in the walkway.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and the private alleyway, I would be into the road.
Right.
Because that's a 20-foot driveway from the alley.
Right.
So that's my biggest concern. We can't limit the size of cars that people buy.
Everybody has trucks.
Yeah. So parking is a big concern to me, and if we also accept narrowing the private street and narrowing the public street from 65 feet down to 60, and your typical car's, taking up 8 feet on each side? So now you've got 17 feet left of pavement for 2 cars to go side by side. That's tight.
2 trucks with their mirrors going through there.
And boats and trailers, and it's tight. That would be my biggest concern.
Well, it is definitely tight. It's not ideal, and it's not what, as Mr. Guy indicated, it's not what any of us want, but it's a really tough balancing act, as they indicated. It'd be nice to have more room. It'd be nice if everybody had enough money to buy the housing style in the neighborhoods on each side. And it would be nice. I personally would feel better about a subdivision application, not a PUD, that met the codes with kind of the deal that was made with us and the city council at the last proposal. But there is a give and take with the open space, and now there's not a lot of room for these kids. And so are the tighter roads a good, we're accepting some tight roads to have some green space for these kids. I don't really know which one's better.
and Commissioners, let's, just to keep it focused on the parking, I think there's other issues on the streets that we can discuss in a minute. So on the parking issue, it seems like generally there's concerns that there is not enough parking. I would note that the staff report does say that it does meet the Post Falls codes for the on-street and off-street parking, just as one of the part of the consideration, but I'm noting that there is.
Is there a code for a private street? We're talking about the private street.
Both. I'm talking about both.
There is private street design standards for minimum requirements for the road cross-sections. It was identified that they do meet the minimums of our design standards for a private street. I don't know if how well that ties into that concern, but
My concern is when we combine, okay, so they meet that requirement, but when we combine a narrower street, both streets narrower, and we reduce setbacks, and those driveways are only 20 feet in one car, it's like, I don't know, I just feel like we've given on every single point. It's just my thought.
And again, I was just noting for your deliberation, I'm not advocating one way or the other, I'm just pointing out what was said in the staff report.
So the minimum private street standard, is that for a street with parking or just?
so you do get parking on one side, and it allows for, like, if you have there's like a 28-foot, I think is the minimum width you can have, and have parking on one side. So you have 28 feet minus the 8 foot, leaves about 20 feet. Now, on the north side of that private drive, their parking is actually on Holstein. So on theirs, their parking would be on the north side where it's continuous. Once again, though, I still think you're in a position to balance all of your guys' concerns, with the review criteria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the second criteria.
I don't know, Rob, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Members of the commission, Robert Paulus, city engineer. Just wanted to clarify, there was some discussions about the narrowing of the roads. The narrowing that keeps getting mentioned is the narrowing of the rights-of-way. The roads themselves have to meet the city standards to allow parking, and the city standards are very clear, whether it's a public road or a private road. For parking on one side, the minimum width of the roadway itself is 28 feet. When you get to parking on both sides of the roadway, the minimum width of the roadway is 32 feet. You can't go narrower than those and reduce the amount of parking. If they tried for a roadway that's less than 28 feet wide, they would not be allowed to have any parking on it whatsoever. And again, in order to have parking on both sides of the street, it has to be a minimum of 32 feet wide, and that's measured from the flow line of the curb to the flow line of the curb, and that's the standard throughout the entire city. So just wanted to give that clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Criteria number 2. The proposed PUD provides for an integrated transportation network which adequately serves the proposed development by subsection A, providing for the continuation of arterial and collector streets, meeting city standards for volume in a manner consistent with the city's adopted master transportation plan.
Well, they did say they were doing connectivity of the other streets, the main streets coming out, that, for the immediate traffic and everything.
I don't see an issue with the way that it's connected to Spokane Street or to Guy. And that meets the city's requirements, and those streets are, because we've had that conversation before, especially about Spokane Street and what it can accommodate in terms of traffic. And with the right-of-way dedications that are being made along Spokane, I think that only improves. And along Guy.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. Secondly, providing a local street network that allows adequate traffic circulation and snow storage throughout the entire development.
Well, they did note that they do have sections for snow storage from the private street.
Two of them, one on each
Yeah,
end.
two and two.
I don't really understand how that works, though, unless you bring in a front loader and pack all the snow to the ends around all the cars. And
It's expensive.
I don't really think that's going to work, but there's some thought put into it, but
Okay, a little disagreement on that issue, and noted. Next, providing a pedestrian and bicycle system designed to provide adequate circulation throughout the entire development and to all open spaces.
Yeah, there was mention of connectivity of trails throughout the development.
And they do have sidewalks on all the streets, including the private, at least on the one side of the private road. So in my opinion, the sidewalks and so forth are adequate and meet, according to our city staff report, we meet that requirement. Although I just have some concern about the driveway length blocking the.
yeah, the usefulness of the sidewalk. I can't see setbacks from the building setbacks here from the private street. I'm trying to see it.
There's an exhibit. It's this one.
Okay.
So if you're 20 feet there to the road, you know, my truck would be out to there. On this side, it'd be blocking the driveway. Or blocking the sidewalk. 20 feet.
Yeah.
You guys good, or you got more comments?
No.
All right. Thank you, Commissioners. Number 3, the proposed PUD provides enhanced community design by conserving and incorporating significant natural, scenic, or historical features. I don't believe
I
there
don't
was
think
any
there was any of those.
testimony about historical developments, with the exception of noting the 6-foot fence line along the rail corridor. Whether a rail corridor is historic or not is a matter of an opinion. 3B, integrating a mix of compatible land uses in the development and adequately buffering and or separating incompatible uses in the development.
I understand the concerns about mixing a little bit higher density with lower density, but this property is zoned R2. And for reference, the R2 zone would typical R2 zoning would allow a 4,000 square foot minimum lot. If you put 4,000 square foot minimum lots on this 11 acres, they could do 122 houses on here.
Wow.
But we limited, our recommendation to city council was 8 units per acre. So at 8 units per acre, that's 92 units. That's what they're going for. So even if this wasn't a PUD, they could come back with that same density as a subdivision. And then we wouldn't have the open space. We might have 4,000 square foot lots, but we wouldn't have any open space. It's a trade-off. Just a comment.
Is there any more discussion on the compatibility of the land uses, Commissioners and Commissioner Schlotthauer?
No.
No? Okay. Locating the proposed uses and lot sizes in the proposed PUD in a manner that blends with the surrounding uses, neighborhoods, and facilities located in the city.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And I think we need different housing, but everything's R1 out there. And while this is R2 is the type of development correct, in my opinion, I don't know.
And I believe there was some testimony as to the siding and the drive aisles leading to the more dense units kind of being interior, at least through the private driveway, and where the exterior units would be fronting or rear loaded. There was some testimony about that. I don't know that there was a lot of other testimony presented, I guess is what I would note. See if there's any agreement on that issue.
I think they've put quite a bit of work into trying to make it blend. And in that respect, I think it blends as well as it can for higher density adjacent to the lower density.
And they're still going to be subject to the rest of the zoning requirements in terms of building height and so forth. So, for example, my understanding is the maximum, they can go to a 25-foot height. And if they go over 25-foot height in their building, then they're adding additional setback for that. Correct?
The height, maximum height in both the R1 and R2 is 35 feet.
Okay. But if they go over 25, they have to increase their setbacks.
No.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And finally, on 3D, providing at least 10% of the gross land area for open space, meeting the recreational needs of the users and of the development.
Yeah, I think there was, you said 11.7?
11.7, yeah.
Thank you. Finally, the proposed PUD provides for timely development of the property and security for future completion and maintenance by ensuring that each development block contains the necessary elements to exist independently from future blocks. This criteria really kind of looks at the phasing that we've talked about a little bit. It sounds like the applicant had 3 phases, and then Mr. Manley suggested that the development of phase 3 not began until the open space developments are completed and dedicated or finalized, so we avoid a situation in the future where that does not occur. I would take any other comment on that one, commissioners?
No, I fully agree with that. If we do approve that phase 3 does not begin before the open spaces are completely done.
And the applicant
That the open space is completed in phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah. Add that as a condition.
And the applicant was agreeable to that?
Yeah.
Okay, 4B, ensuring that each building in the development lot has sufficient access around the structure to allow for maintenance of the building and access for emergency services.
Yeah, I don't think anything came up. Obviously, fire will look at this at some point, and if they have concerns, they will bring those to attention.
Yeah, before this is finalized, the fire department's gonna have to sign off on all those public, or those private roads and turnarounds and deadheads and so forth.
Finally, C, ensuring that a funding mechanism exists to adequately maintain common areas that are not publicly maintained.
How do we do that?
How do we condition, is that a condition you
Part of
place
the
to
HOA.
develop the HOA, or how's that work?
There is a condition in there that they have to have an HOA to maintain private areas. That's
Yeah,
part
it
of
says,
their,
it says they have a required HOA.
Yeah, so that's.
but how do we, but the language is that we ensure that there's a funding mechanism.
No. And the
And
HOA,
yet-
and the HOAs, once the HOA is set up, the city isn't involved in the managing of the HOA because it's a
Right.
private agreement among the landowners. So the best we can do is require that they have an HOA, and as part of the condition, the CCNRs provide for the maintenance. How they fund it is really upon the private developer at that point.
That's been a big concern of mine. If there's not capital reserves set aside, and again, cities don't get involved in HOAs, but if there's not proper capital reserves set aside, you could have a bunch of first-time home buyers stuck with a huge bill for repaving on these private roads.
This is to maintain the common areas that are not publicly maintained. And again, we are dealing with private streets as well.
Right.
I know your concern.
But as a city, we do allow private streets, and they're meeting code on that. I'm just questioning the ensuring a funding mechanism.
But that's the same with every HOA.
Yeah.
It is,
I
I
mean,
know.
they have,
Every development.
yeah, so we can't control those.
No.
All right, thank you, commissioners. So,
Act on this first.
well, this presupposes into the subdivision development. We can quickly go through the criteria, and then why don't we just go through the criteria on the subdivision development? I'll take the motion separately. On the subdivision criteria, 1 and 2, I think we've addressed. 1 is whether adequate water supply has been proposed, and I think we've covered that issue with the East Green Acre.
Yep.
2, adequate sewage, City of Post Falls. I think
City
that
Post, yep.
is undebatable. 3, proposed streets are consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. So on this issue, I'll just give you a little bit of guidance to think about. Obviously, on its own, without the PUD, the development would probably not be adequate without the PUD being approved as well. And again, with the street, I don't know if it's the street layout specifically, but the proposed streets are consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan is what's being asked for in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of create that connectivity with other roads.
Well, are you allowed to have a private street if it's not a PUD?
Yes.
Yeah, so then I guess it wouldn't matter.
Just a procedural question. Why do we have a subdivision application and a PUD application? Why don't, I'm a little.
Saving time.
So I consider the PUD to be like an overlay over the subdivision. Subdivision splits up lots, divides it
Right.
into individual parcels, and that's required by the Idaho Code. The PUD is asking for amendments to our normal subdivision process to allow for these modifications we've talked about. It would be up to if the commission decides not to go forward with the PUD, the subdivision application probably also fails.
That's what I was going to ask, is I don't see a way to approve one or without the other.
Not the way it's presented, probably. But we do need the separate findings, just to satisfy what the city code requires. So it's laborious, I do not
Just
debate that. So on 3, it sounds like the street layouts as proposed with the private streets and the public streets are consistent with the plan. If the PUD also passes, is what I would suggest. All right, number 4, all areas of the proposed subdivision involving soil or topographical conditions presenting hazards have been identified.
None of them.
None were identified. Yeah.
Points. Number 5, the area for the proposed subdivision is zoned for the proposed use, and the use conforms to other requirements found in the code. And again, this is determinant on the PUD as well, if you make that finding separately. There was testimony that the single-family detached homes are available and would be subject to the PUD approval, but are otherwise, it sounds like, compliant with those proposed changes. And finally, number 6, the developer has made adequate plans to ensure the community will bear no more than its fair share costs to provide service of fees for mitigation, off-site mitigation.
And those are impact fees. So,
Yeah, and as standard, the impact fees would be collected at the time of the development or the individual building permits to offset those. So with that, commissioners, why don't we circle back around, if you please, back to deliberation and perhaps a motion on the PUD matter first.
yeah, but before we do a motion, I'd just like to state a couple things here. I think there's a lot of good and there's a lot of honestly bad stuff in here. Maybe not bad is a bad word to use, but I do have a lot of concerns with the parking and the roads, just the street parking. Even in my current neighborhood that I live in, it's sometimes not easy to get around in there. And I wasn't at the meeting where this was approved, but 85 lots was thrown around. Now we're at 92. I think that's a big concern for a lot of people sometimes when you see one number and then another number comes up. With that being said, it is single-family homes. There is no multifamily homes. We throw around this word affordable housing that is defined differently to different people with where mortgage rates are. Who knows what really is affordable to anybody at this point. Until those come down, nothing's going to be really affordable. So, I don't know, this one's really a tough one for me to approve it as it is. That's my thoughts.
This is all surrounded by R1. The first time this came before us, I voted for it because the R2 application wasn't like a real R2 application. It was like R2 light. And now it comes back with more houses, smaller lots, and that's just doesn't fit there for me. I mean, the size of those lots is tiny. Doesn't work for me.
Ross, anything to add?
Not really.
Chris?
I'm torn on this one too. With the R2 zoning, I know we put a caveat on it, but typically they could get a lot more density there than they are getting.
I don't really think so.
Well, physically, they may not be able to.
Physically, yeah, the math varies from the actual feasible design.
Yes.
And I think this ranking, the density is tight as.
Yep. And I would agree. I would agree. Yeah, my biggest concern is traffic. Not necessarily traffic, but the congestion on the roads, primarily due to parking.
Right.
And that, you know, there are certainly other examples of that around.
If the lots were a little bigger, the cars would be farther from the sidewalk. The kids could ride their bikes on the sidewalks and the streets, and it is so dense. And the people that are going to be living here are, you know, the demographic have kids. And so but they've got to be able to afford something. And so it's really a tough one.
At 1,800 square feet plus or minus, these are $500,000 homes.
Yeah, I don't think they're
There's
gonna.
no way to get it under that.
I don't think they'll be 1,800 square footers, but maybe.
I think you mentioned there would be some or one.
Potential.
Potentially.
Potential.
Yeah. Potential, there you go.
Vicky Jo?
Yeah, you're right. This is a hard one, but we're talking the difference between 85 and 92. We're talking, 7 houses. I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference. And I do see our need. We do have a need for affordable housing in our area, and that's, you know, I mean, we really do. So, and this is the only way we're going to get it, is doing cottage homes or something. And like they said, they could have crammed a lot more homes if they would have worked it right, just in strictly R2. So this, to me, is a little bit better than them doing that. And I totally understand, you know, when you have R1 and you don't want something, I had that. I had R1 and had apartments built next to me. It's hard, but that's what's happening, and that's the growth in our community, and it's going to keep happening. And we just have to do the best we can and try, you know, integrate the different styles of homes.
All right.
No,
Ma'am?
not talking.
Ma'am? Kibby, anything else to add?
I think it's all been said. This is a tough one, but the need for affordable housing is real, and we can't keep doing what we've been doing and not address it. So I think projects like this are well thought out. It's clear there's been a lot of work put into this to try to make it work. And I think this is the best that it can be. It's not R1. It's not going to be R1. And it's not designed to be R1. It's designed to fit a need that we all know exists in our community. I think it's important that we look at these projects. I guess for me, I think it's important that we look at these projects with from that viewpoint of how can we make this work. And I think this project did a pretty good job with that.
All right, if somebody would like to make a motion, keeping in mind if it's going to be approval, please add the condition that the applicant and John had talked about with the phasing in the parks. And I don't know if we need to add anything about Mrs. Thomas's area with the tree and It
I think they
sounds
put
like,
that in the plans.
sounds like they've worked that out, so.
Yeah,
But just keep
Mike
that,
Merle
keep that
addressed
in
that,
mind.
and it was all part of their deal.
Yeah. And we'll, PUD, anybody like to make a motion?
I will. I move to approve Harvest Meadows PUD, file number PUD -25-1, finding that it meets the approved criteria in Post Falls Municipal Code 18.20.080 as outlined in our deliberation, subject to conditions 1 through 12 contained in the staff report, and adding condition 13 that both common areas be completed before the start of Phase 3 of the development, and direct the staff to prepare a written reasoned decision.
Okay, motion on the floor. Anybody second?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Carrie,
Yes.
Walton,
Yes.
Stephenson,
No.
Schlotthauer,
Yes.
Schreiber,
No.
Wilhelm,
No?
3-3.
I think it fails.
Okay.
What?
So no, so a tie fails. No, then we still need a motion for the subdivision
Well,
for
I think of
procedural
the
reasons?
PUD,
We really need to.
As the subdivision would be conditioned on the PUD, I don't know that a motion is necessary,
Okay.
but I think it fails as a matter of course, because it cannot meet the conditions unless there's agreement otherwise.
Agreed. Okay. All right, with that being said, I would like to take a 5-minute recess. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. So we're going to do a 5-minute recess and then we'll finish up. Call the meeting back to order. All right, we'll continue tonight with our next public hearing, Painted Rock Annexation. John Manley to present.
Yeah, so Painted Rock Annexation, file number ANNX 253. The owner is Rhino Land LLC, and the representative is Ray Kimball from Whipple Consulting Engineers. They're requesting a recommendation to City Council for medium-density R2 zoning on approximately 4.67 acres as part of an annexation request. So just to make it clear, what occurs isn't a decision on the annexation, it's just a recommendation of zoning for City Council to ponder the annexation itself. Here's a location. It's hatched in this black box here, just on the northwest corner of Midway and McGuire Road. Surrounding zoning is, as you see here, to the south, you see some townhome product here just to the south in the R2 zoning. You see off to the east, that yellow, that's R1 zoning on the east side of McGuire. And a little bit further south, you see some R1 at that location. You go a bit further and you get down towards Southeast Way along the north side of it. You see some CCS and some heavy industrial, and along the south, you see some other CCS. East of McGuire in the lighter gray, that's industrial zoning. Land use on the site is currently a large lot, single family. It's over the Rathrum Prairie Aquifer. Wastewater is serviced by the City of Post Falls, and there is capacity to serve this. Any existing septic systems would be required to be removed. Water would be provided by East Green Irrigation. For traffic, you have Midway Avenue. It's classified as a minor arterial, and McGuire Road is an arterial. Additional rights-of-way and easements would be needed as part of the annexation. See here on the future land use, you have the medium densities, this orangish color, and it transitions to a high density and then goes and transitions to that business commercial along Southeast Way. Project sites in the West Prairie focus area, and you see that there about that location right on the fringe of that focus area. What I provided here, for the next few slides, is I used Street View, and I wanted to provide some context because we have been a little bit removed from the future land use, so people can wonder why this zoning is what it is and why does it go from business commercial, high density, medium density, and then that blue, I didn't mention it, but that's transitional. Well, we had a workshop on this specifically on this area, and what was considered was Southeast Way. This is the north side of Southeast Way, and the types of uses that are along the northern edge of that. And then, so you take into context of that Southeast Way, and then to the north of that you don't see, you see some other storage areas and a mobile home park to the north side. So the concept on this was to transition the look and feel of the existing business commercial area, and then how do you mitigate potentially long-term with the width of Southeast Way, the traffic counts on Southeast Way, the future light, noise, and other polluting type activities that go down that and would migrate to the north. Sound, is omnidirectional, and so it was deemed as this some high density product might help mitigate some of the sound aspect. You have noise of the ambulatory activity or other transportation type activities that could be going along Southeast Way. Similarly, you do have some other lighting issues that could occur as there potentially redevelopment. And on redevelopment, that's the other thing that was considered as part of this comp plan was, how do you, is there a desire to redevelopment that business corridor? How do you create some potentially additional rooftops in the area to help infuse that corridor for that redevelopment? So that's the pretense of why that is what it is. So that's why I have that question here is, what are these future uses as we go from here, from McGuire Road and Southeast Way, and it transitions to that rail corridor, and I kind of highlighted in blue over here off to the east, kind of have a bubble call out with some of these surrounding uses. How does that occur? And what is the right zoning? I put some proximity measurements from Celtice Way, for different uses, on this, for the distance from Echo, from Midway, and from the rail. What are those distances from Celtice Way? So I got that quarter mile, half mile, and 3/4 mile marker. And there's that road classification you see here at Midway, that minor collector roadway. It does, go from the Montrose development, and it does anticipate to go westerly towards Corbin. Whether that's the actual location there at that terminus at Corbin, I've talked internally. As development goes to the west, there may be opportunities to create a better alignment and a better fit further away from that rail corridor. But it still can serve as a decent east-west road connector to divert traffic, so not all the traffic has to go down McGuire Road to Celtice Way, and it could encourage traffic to Corbin Road and split that traffic up. Now looking at the comprehensive plan compatibility in the West Prairie, it looks at embracing a variety of housing types and land uses, maintain equality standards, and provide even greater emphasis on pedestrian friendliness and connecting neighborhoods. This kind of ties into the goal 6, maintain and improve the transportation network and pace and in concert with the needed plans objectives. So you look at some policy points: plan for the transportation corridors and encroachments and preserve right-of-way, maintain and improve continuity in sidewalks and bicycle paths in Post Falls, and that annexation can help implement this endeavor. So by getting one of the aspects that occurs is when you annex the land, before the ordinance is recorded, they grant right-of-way and easements, and then in this case, it would be for both Midway and McGuire. If you notice on this picture, 3 of the corners are within the city of Post Falls. So this would complete the 4th corner. So that would allow safe pedestrian access going north-south, east-west, as well as improve those right-of-ways going north-south along that corridor. Therefore, meeting those policies there in the comprehensive plan, as well as being consistent with the focus area. Look at goal 7, plan for and establish types of quantities of land uses in Post Falls and the community needs for city's long-term sustainability. Then you look at policy 15, ensure that adequate land is available for future housing needs, helping serve all ages and all residents for all ages, incomes through diverse housing. I've mentioned already this evening about the housing needs study. The R2 can provide an opportunity to create more attainable. I don't know if affordable is really, like we already mentioned it tonight. I think really where we're at is looking and try to increase the number of attainable housing versus unattainable or less attainable.
Is that a new catchphrase we're gonna start using?
Attainable.
Yeah, it's,
Affordable housing.
well, I've now had, this is like it started out affordable, and then it moved to workforce. Workforce was what everybody used. Now we've moved on to attainable. I'm sure before one of my next future comp plans, it'll be a different word.
Not so unattainable.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
Is to be attainable?
I definitely don't lay awake at night pondering what that future word would be, but there probably will be one.
You might think about that and awake and ponder.
So this is the 3 review criteria, and I've kind of gone over the first 2, that dealing with the future land use map, the focus area, the goals and policies. The staff report, I go into a lot more detail on those. And then the third one is, does the proposed zoning district create a demonstrable adverse impact upon delivery of services by any political subdivision? So we do public notice, we notice out, we see, what concerns might be through those. Here's, in general, who we notice. Of the comments we got back, school district, they remain neutral. Kootenai County Fire, they review at time of permitting. Department of Environmental Quality, they had said that there was really no environmental impact, and like I said, they really didn't say impact, they said concerns. Kootenai County, no comments or concerns. Idaho Transportation Department, they had no comment. And Phillips 66, YPL, the gas line, they said no utilities are in the vicinity, and the Highway District had no concerns. There's the 3 review criteria. Any questions for me at this point with the proposed R2 zoning in this location?
Was there recently another annexation request in this area that we heard?
Yeah, there was one a bit north of the tracks that forwarded a recommendation on to city council. I believe that was for an R1.
By pole line, wasn't it? In McGuire.
The southwest corner.
Yeah.
And that didn't go through, did it?
No,
True.
it did not.
So for traffic, McGuire is getting shut off soon, correct?
Relatively soon, yeah, up on the northern end.
Right. Okay.
Questions? All right.
Okay.
Invite the applicant up.
Thank you, John. Ray Kimball, for the record, Whip Consulting Engineers. I'm here tonight representing the audience, the applicant. So I'll get right to it. I will direct you to the staff report and our application for a lot of the record. Of course, here at the project site, there was, I think, one of the applications you might have been asking about is that there was a recent public hearing, I believe, for this property here to annex as R2, and I believe that was recommended for approval, and that is still waiting in the wings for city council approval. Of course, there's city limits, and we are requesting a medium density residential, R2, which is an implementing zone for medium density residential. This is a glimpse of the future subdivision. So this has been applied for. It is sitting in queue at the city. It'll be in front of a public future hearing. So these are single-family residential lots. They are 50-foot wide lot product, which is basically the typical city of Post Falls single-family home. 40-foot wide houses on 50-foot wide land or lots, of course. The reason for this is that, of course, R1 requires us to have a minimum of 60 feet wide, which pretty much most of the builders all have 40-foot wide products, so it kind of leaves a 10 and 10 setback on each side. If they want to do their entry-level product by going down to a 50-foot wide product as allowed in the R2 zone, we are able to get more lots, reduces the overall cost of the lots relative with the same infrastructure, essentially. So the cost per lot goes down for the infrastructure, and we essentially get the same product. So we get a few more lots. And I won't belabor this too much here. It's a very straightforward single family. If you were to look across the street at Montrose, they have 50-foot wide lots. It's basically the same thing. So the density is 4.5 units per acre on that one, on this, and that's our intent. Got an existing house on it. So with regards to, is it in compliance with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map? Yes, absolutely. It is medium density residential on the comp plan map, and R2 is an implementing zone within that. We are promoting infill development, and someone may question whether that is infill or not infill. So this gives you an idea of where this is kind of in the big picture scope of things. So this area right here is all within the city of Post Falls. All the way around is this little peninsula of county, and this right here is the only part where county is connected to county right there. So there's 2 properties. If those 2 were to annex, then they would be making a complete island. So really this is, if it's not an island, it's a peninsula. It is infill. And that's where we're located. So with regards to comprehensive plan, goals and policies, John hit a lot of them in staff report. He hit some in his presentation. County Island is one of them. This is a county peninsula. Making sure that we have adequate housing or land for future housing is incredibly important. One of the things, we talk about annexing these county islands first, and in close where there's utilities, there's sewer right across the street, water's in McGuire and in Midway. So all the utilities are there. And I know there's a desire to focus on some of the islands, and that's a noble thing to do. It's a right thing to do. And in order for but there's got to be there's a little bit of a special recipe for development, and property's got to be large enough size to be able to redevelop it. So typically about 5 acres, 4 or 5 acres. It's got to be the right shape. Long, skinny ones don't do very well. So, and it's got to be contiguous to the city of Post Falls, and it's got to be for sale. And the last one is one of the hardest ones. So, and you might have it, but you really have to have, that cocktail has to require all three, all of those elements in order for it to be something that actually makes a development happen. And so when you see the properties in the little islands on the eastern side of the city of Post Falls, when they see those properties come up for sale, they get snatched up very, very quickly. And then they come in, and I asked the prior city engineer once, probably 15 years ago, why don't you just annex all of those properties in right now? And his answer was really simple. He said, because we'd have to pay for the right-of-way. And we don't want to pay for the right-of-way. And so one of the things that happens, and we've got this transportation master plan that's very well thought out, and it's looking not just 5, 10, 15 years, it's looking 20 years into the future and even beyond. And if we were to think about what McGuire is really going to look like in the future, and what our, in Post Falls, we have our biggest issue from a traffic standpoint is access to the interstate. So where we have good access to the interstate is on the far west part of the city, and we don't have a whole lot of homes over there, but Spokane Street, congested. We've got Celtice Way interchange is only a half interchange. And then we got Highway 41. And then if we look west, Federal Highway Administration says you have to have 1 mile in between interchanges. And so we got Pleasant View, 1 mile to the east, that's McGuire. That's probably the next logical spot for any sort of an interchange if we're looking at something like that. Maybe not 20 years in the future, maybe 30 years in the future. But that's why that's why McGuire is considered a local or a minor arterial, is because there is that potential there for that to actually become an interchange, and it's an important north-south route, not necessarily to get to Highway 53, which is going to be cut off, but in order to get people from the area south of Highway 53 down to the interstate and down to Celtice Way, at least down to Celtice Way, where they can disperse either direction to get to the interstate. So why is it important why do I talk about that? Well, and the right-of-way comes for free, right? So what does that really look like? So I did a quick cost takeoff for what the improvements, the follow-on improvements. So these are improvements that happen with the subdivision. The right-of-way cost is $6 a square foot. That comes right out of our capital improvement plan. That's $130,000 of free land that the city would not have to purchase in the future. And then beyond that, the total cost of the actual improvements that get built with the subdivision, these are the frontage improvements, we end up with just shy of $300,000 in today's costs. We expand that out at 2% inflation for 10 years. That's $355,000 worth of improvements that basically the city gets for free. City doesn't have to buy it, doesn't have to use taxpayer dollars, doesn't have to use impact fee dollars, doesn't have to use grants or grant match. That is all developer driven, developer funded, and that is one of the ways that the city very astutely plans for and gets the infrastructure constructed to meet our traffic challenges in the future. Because if it doesn't happen now, it doesn't happen, then, so if these properties don't annex in, what happens? Well, the developers sell them. They sell them to someone from California or somewhere that wants to buy a 5-acre lot, and they build their nice little in-town farm compound, big house, and then they don't redevelop. And so when the background traffic gets to a point where the infrastructure is necessary, then the city's on the hook to use eminent domain or purchase the property, the right-of-way, and then has to build the infrastructure. And that all comes out of either traffic impact fees, general fund, or whatever other funding mechanisms happen. So this is why it's important to look at the transportation element and why is that really important. And so that's why I wanted to bring that up tonight. So does this proposed zoning district create a demonstrable adverse impact on the delivery of services? No, it does not. As a matter of fact, I would say that it's probably the opposite. It provides for future transportation needs that otherwise would not be available. And with that, I'll ask for any questions or answer any questions or address any concerns you might have.
Questions? No questions. Thank you. Public testimony? All right, not wishing to speak in favor, Scott Kryjak. Says in favor. All right. Applicant like to do rebuttal? Not needed. Excellent. All right, close out the hearing and look at our review criteria.
Okay, Commissioners, we have in front of you Painted Rock Annexation File Number 25-3. Requested zoning recommendation for R2 of the 4.67 acres. Number 1, is the proposed zoning district consistent with the future land use map and focused area contained in the currently adopted comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
So we have medium density residential and R2 is an implementing zone. It sounds like there's not a lot of debate on that issue. Number 2, is the proposed zoning district consistent with the goals and policies contained in the currently adopted comp plan that are relevant to the area under consideration? And again, on this one, if we could cite to some goals and policies, that's always helpful.
Policy 15, I think, is the big one.
And what is policy 15?
For diverse housing for all
Yeah.
shapes and sizes.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that was the one I was going to mention also. It's not R1, so you're not getting the bigger houses, you're getting a little bit smaller, and as we've talked about a lot tonight, affordable, attainable, not as expensive, whatever word you want to use. Hopefully, these will meet the needs for some sort of future buyer.
And on these decisions, I'm always looking at not whether annexation is a good or bad idea, but if it was to come in, what is the appropriate, zoning district? And if the request is consistent with that approach, if it's going to come in, what should it be? So that's helpful. Thank you. And finally, number 3, does the proposed zoning district, R2, create a demonstrable adverse impact upon the delivery of public services?
No.
There's been none identified.
I think that was a pretty interesting presentation, speaking about the preserving our option for future transportation there. It's a pretty good point. I'm excited to see how that is conveyed in another month or so, how that works.
And we had no agency feedback, no negative agency feedback.
Yeah, really no evidence to the contrary.
Correct.
Is the way it would come out, so. Okay, that's all I have, Commissioners.
I'd like to say something on this. With all the houses that are tore down, Post Falls, all the new developments, we forget a little bit about the history of the people that lived there. That house there that was on that corner that was took off there, Joan and Larry Leahy lived there since 1960, raised 2 kids. Larry moved there in 1940 with his parents when he was 15. He became an adult, moved away, married Joan. His parents gave him that property. Larry was instrumental in a lot of the East Green Acres water stuff that went on. So just a little history about Post Falls. So, cool.
Nice, thank you.
Anybody else have any comments? Or would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to recommend approval. And what are we calling this? The Painted Rock Annexation. It's file ANNX-25-3. Finding that the requested R2 zoning meets the approval criteria in Post Falls Municipal Code, and as outlined in our deliberation, and direct staff to prepare a zoning recommendation to be provided to City Council.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
I have a,
Hold on.
don't we have one condition or something to be considered? The dedication of the right-of-way and stuff?
There are 2 conditions, I think.
That's going to be a condition anyways.
Yeah, I think what's going to go to the council
already-
is already included.
Okay.
Unless you disagree with those conditions, but we generally forward on what the staff report is, and those get considered at council, so it's included.
Thank you, sorry.
No, thank you for the follow-up, I appreciate that.
All right. We still have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Wilhelm? Schreiber?
Yes.
Schlotthauer?
Yes.
Stephenson?
Yes.
Walton?
Yes.
Carey?
Yes.
All right. And our final hearing tonight, a Title 18 housekeeping text amendment. Open up the hearing.
All right, yes, the Title 18 housekeeping amendment. This has actually been works for quite a while. So yeah, the applicant is the Post Falls Planning Division over in Community Development, and we are requesting an amendment to Title 18. What we're looking to is to establish parameters whereupon certain development frontage improvements and right-of-way dedications would not be required, providing that remaining sections of Post Falls City Code would be adhered to. And where we're going with this is a lot with infill requests and development. So historically, we would have requests to build an accessory building on a lot in an older part of town, and they're not near sidewalks, and our code requires that any time that you would expand more than 25% of the lot, that it would trigger alley improvements or frontage improvements. Well, if you're just trying to build a shop, well, that might be cost prohibitive to build that, so then people aren't investing into their house and, you know, in building up their own equity in their own place and investing in it. And so we had a path historically that we would go and bring these frontage improvement requests to council. Council would review the proposal, and staff would weigh in on whether or not you would waive or not based on a proximity to nearby sidewalks. For a multitude of years, that we would almost always end up going back to city council, explaining how we're being consistent with that, and there isn't subjectivity to it. And so what we worked on was proposing code language that was a little bit more clear and concise, that allowed people to do infill development, do their accessory buildings, and without triggering those frontage improvements. That kind of summarizes those bullet points there. So, way the code is explained in Exhibit S1 in your staff report is dedication and frontage improvements are not required in the following circumstances. So it would be for temporary or seasonal uses. That's consistent with what the current language says. And then the next part is for residential accessory structures on lots that are not in smart code zone. So why do we have in a smart code zone? Well, where we have a smart code zone, majority is either A, developed on the periphery already, or it's in the downtown area getting redeveloped. Well, we have alleys here, and it's in more of an urban setting, and in an urban setting, having paved alleyways makes logical sense, since you can get a lot of delivery services and access to rear parking lots in the back. Do not front a collector or arterial roadway. So if you have a lot and you're on a busy street, it more than likely could benefit from having those frontage improvements. And so on those lots, if you happen to be on a busy corner lot, then we would trigger those frontage improvements. Are smaller in square footage than and on a lot that are smaller in square footage than the primary residence. So
Are those ands, are those three ands?
Yes. So you couldn't be a smaller than a square footage per, and as long as you're on a collector or trailway roadway, you're gonna trigger them. So yeah, it would be an and. And the other case is for infill development on pre-existing platted city lots, and so what we did is we played a scenario for what if you had a lot and you could fit 3 cottage homes or 3 tiny homes? Well, if you hit somebody up with the frontage improvements maybe on 2 corners plus the alley, now you're making it cost prohibitive to get infill development to get what our housing needs is trying to incentivize a certain product type. And that's why we clarified on either a cottage home or a tiny home. So these are going to be smaller residential lots. So you're not going to see an 1,800 square foot home. You know, you're going to see either a 1,400 square foot home that says only 1,200 can be on the main floor. So the only way to get up to 1,400 is to either A, do like a 7 and 7, an 8 and 6, and do some, you know, a 2-story house that way. You know, so you could do that, but you couldn't go more than 1,200 square foot on the main floor. Or a tiny house, which is less than 800 square feet. So in those scenarios, creating up to 3 additional cottage or tiny houses through plat or site plan review, provided that the lots are not located in a smart grid zone, once again continuing that theme, and do not front to collector arterial, carrying that theme forward. So that's pretty much what we're replacing the old code with this, and then this will be like citywide, and it'll be really clear that if you're on one of those spots, you're gonna do it. If you're outside, then you're eligible to. You just actually wouldn't trigger them.
You say you're eligible?
No, I misspoke. You just wouldn't, it wouldn't trigger them.
Okay.
So the frontage, the waiver request is going away.
Okay.
It's just either triggered or not triggered.
Trigger or not trigger, okay.
Great idea.
I think so too.
What about condos and townhomes?
Well, it'd be the condos and townhomes. No, wouldn't work.
And why?
Because a townhome is not a cottage or a tiny home. So you'd be looking at so if you're doing an increase in densification, it's not an accessory building.
Okay.
Right? And it's
Yeah.
not a cottage or tiny. So those would trigger frontage improvements.
And the reason why we wouldn't want to encourage those is just policy?
More or less. Historically, a lot of times when we increase the development rights of a piece of land, you're turning one lot into 4 lots or 5 lots or 6 lots. You're getting some increased development right on that piece of land, therefore potentially could absorb the cost of the offsite improvements. And so that's where that third line came in, is there a middle ground to where if you're meeting one of our pretenses of meeting our housing needs, should there be some willingness to have a middle ground so we can get the kind of housing we need to hit the price points to more or less hit that attainable housing niche?
Yeah.
And so we would we'd waive that for tiny house, but if somebody had a lot that could accommodate 3 townhomes, we wouldn't waive it for that.
No, more or less, no, we wouldn't, because if they build 3 townhomes and they're all 2,000 square feet, running about $550,000 each.
Okay, so it's the square footage.
You know, then they're hitting it, then, you know, why would we waive that? Versus if they can go down and go to a 385 cottage home, potentially, because we waived the frontage improvements, they're still gonna connect to sanitary sewer and water. Maybe that's a decent creative way to get some of that in the infill areas where they're close to maybe places of work near their commercial corridor or other places of business.
Okay. I was just thinking of it from just the ownership perspective, that in my mind, the only difference between a cottage, tiny home, or condo is ownership, the ownership structure, not necessarily the square footage.
Right.
But what I'm hearing from you is that cottage and tiny home is actually a square footage question.
Yeah, and it lends itself
Got it.
to have a higher probability of being more attainable than other products.
That makes
It makes projects doable.
That's what we're hoping for. And it creates potentially some densification near our places of business, so you can complement the auto-centric nature of the community and then promote walkability into like Mullen Avenue and other commercial places of commercial focus.
This is us as a city, not just saying catchphrases and talking about attainable housing. This is actually doing something that can really have an effect. That's pretty cool.
We started out with just the first two, and then we're going around, we're looking at vacant lots that we have, and what are the opportunities? And we were playing scenarios out, and so we kind of just creatively just looked at scenarios and said, this might work.
Do we have many instances where you have a vacant lot and then the developments on both sides of it have done those improvements and dedications?
Not many.
So now you have a sidewalk and then the guy in the middle doesn't have to do it.
In fact, we coordinated with engineering. Engineering brought that concern up, and we actually looked around the city. What are the cases where we'd be put in a situation where we're not getting sidewalk, yet the neighbors do have sidewalk? We couldn't really find many valid instances. What would end up happening more or less if we didn't have that, we'd have a lot, they'd get developed, they'd be increasing their, maybe put in 2 single-family homes. We wouldn't have a way to not require it, and then now you'd have sidewalks in the middle of a residential neighborhood that was built in 1980 with no sidewalks.
Right.
Versus this, so you end up with 3 cottage homes. Yeah, their lots might be 10,000 square feet, and these might be smaller lots, but there's not an opportunity to get a sea of them. So, they would more or less fit and not become awkward, and then once again, now you're fitting, you're meeting that housing need in your community also.
And you're spreading people out a little bit more rather than pockets of super dense people. What we were looking at. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, you're looking like maybe a 1/3 acre lot on a corner, maybe a max a 1/2 acre lot on a corner.
Yeah. So do we have to do anything here?
You just forward a recommendation on zoning text amendment, and then ultimately council will weigh in and decide what they want to do with
Need
it.
a motion to forward this, or?
Oh, we got a
So procedurally,
public
because
testimony.
this is a legislative matter, so we have a little bit more flexibility in this, rather than some of the other hearings that we're doing. It is a public hearing, so we're gonna have staff present, public testimony if there is any, and then ultimately what we're doing is there's 2 public hearings on this. We're amending the zoning code, so because of the state code and our local ordinances, this will go back to city council for a public hearing. You folks will look at this and kind of give it yay or nay, or you can amend it if you see some language you don't like and make a suggestion, and then that gets forwarded on. City council will have advertised and have a public hearing to decide whether or not to adopt the ordinance change. So that's where we are procedurally.
Any other questions for John at this time? All right. Any public testimony?
No.
That's a no, all right.
Nancy, can you punch my screen up really quick on that one, please? Was that not you that did that?
You punch the screen up? No, I do not.
Oh, well, you can't see it. This is the existing code right there, and I don't know if it was included in the packet. So the version of the ordinance that you have before you, it's not a redlined version because we're not modifying. We're just simply pulling out all of F and then replacing it with what's in the proposed ordinance in front of you. So sometimes it's nice to see what you're pulling out or modifying, but because we're replacing the whole section, it's easier to just yank the whole section and then replace it with the new language. I just wanted to point that out to you folks.
Okay, so if we're completely removing that section,
And replacing it with a new section F.
okay.
It was too difficult to redline in and out the changes from the existing section, given the modifications that are being proposed.
But so we're leaving in, when constructing or expanding a use on a lot by creating a new land use or expanding an existing use by 25%.
Yeah.
That still stays in there.
Yeah, we're just
To apply to commercial and the other uses.
Got it, okay.
keeping the good, throwing out the bad.
Got it.
All right.
Want to close the hearing?
Don't we need rebuttal? Oh. Close the hearing. Thank you. I don't think there's any more need for discussion. Anybody like to make a recommendation that'll be forwarded to City Council?
I will. I recommend TA-25-1, Title 18, text amendment be forwarded to City Council with our recommendation to approve.
I second.
Okay, we have motion and second. Roll call, please.
Carrie,
Yes.
Walton,
Yes.
Stephenson,
Yes.
Schlauer,
Yes.
Wilhelm,
Yes.
Schreiber.
Yes.
All righty. Number 5 on the agenda, administrative staff reports.
There's none.
Yay. Oh,
Commissioner comments?
I have comment. How come there's no water in the break room anymore?
no refrigerator.
I have no idea. First I've heard of it.
Can we,
No
can we
refrigerator,
put a
no water?
motion in to have one put in?
Local city council meeting.
Well, now that we're aware of it, we probably could adjust that and accommodate that next time.
Well, thank you.
Just take a cup.
Yeah, but that's city water.
You're right, though. I mean, there has usually been in that refrigerator a few bottled waters
Yeah.
that are.
There's no refrigerator.
Oh, it's gone?
Gone.
Oh, maybe we're decided to just use the.
No snacks from you, no refrigerator? What the heck?
Yeah, we got rid of the.
We'll be
treats.
back when the snacks and water are here.
All right. Commissioner comments? Yeah, so workshop next Tuesday, 5 o'clock upstairs. And then we're still planning for 2 meetings in July.
Yep. July 29th is the second.
Second meeting, so the
Yes.
normal second Tuesday, and then July 29th, so.
Okay.
All right. Next item is adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, adjourned.